Pet portraits are easily my most popular commission request. In this video, I'll talk you through my process, giving you tips and tricks on how to approach this type of drawing. When creating realistic artworks, there are three main things to think about: shadows, textures, and form. Luckily, in the case of this subject, the short fur works in my favour. I can use smoother shading and focus more on the shadows and form of the dog. If you're just starting to try realism, I would recommend focusing on smoother objects first. When drawing more textured subjects, such as fluffy, curly or long-haired dogs, replicating the fur while also keeping the shadows and form in consideration is much more difficult, especially if you're new to portraiture. When drawing these subjects, it takes me roughly twice as long to complete the artwork, just because of the texture needed. In saying this, I am not completely ignoring texture when drawing this commission. I am using the movement of my pencil to indicate the direction of fur where it is needed. I am not doing this over the whole piece, however, and I'll explain why. Sometimes it is very easy for us to get bogged down in every little detail of an artwork we are creating. You can spend a long time in a tiny section of the piece, packing in as much detail as you possibly can. I get stuck in this trap too, but the best thing for us to do is to look at the piece as a whole. Sometimes you can take all the time to create these tiny little details, only to take a step back and realize you can't even see them in the grand scheme of the artwork. We need to be critical of where we spend our time. For portraits, I will spend most of my time on the face. I spent the first half of this drawing on the head of the dog. This is where the viewer's eye will be drawn to mostly, and is the most recognizable area of the pet. I wanted to make sure that the dog looks like this person's dog. This is where the importance of good reference comes into play as well. The photo I was sent was from a distance, and it was the pose they wanted for the drawing. To help me fill in some of the details, I requested some other photos as well. In the original photo, I was unable to see the little markings that are above the nose, whereas on the close-up images they were quite prominent. I wanted to make sure I included those details to make sure the dog is more recognizable to the owner. Let's talk about shadows and form. These elements go hand in hand. The shadows and light of the piece will help to indicate the form of the subject. Form is important as it will help to give the feeling of the subject being three-dimensional. In my initial drawing, I included some lines that help guide me on where the shadows need to go based on the reference. By doing this, I can block in my tones without having to think about positioning of the shadows, as I have already done the work to figure out the placement. I will normally block in from the darkest areas first, then work my way through to the midtones and then to the highlights. For the brightest areas, such as the reflections in the eyes, you will want to leave the paper clean for the best effect. In other areas, sometimes it is what you take away that will give you the nicest results. I like to place down my midtone, then erase areas for the lightest points in the fur. This gives a softer appearance, and while brightening up the area, it won't be pure white. Yes, the dog in the image does have white fur, but it will not be the same bright white as the paper. With most natural subjects, white will actually be off-white. I reserved the pure white for the most intense highlights. For this drawing, those highlights are in the nose, eyes, and the metal dog tag. There are some areas where I purposefully deviate from the reference. Sometimes it is necessary to make sure the image remains clear. I would recommend this in areas where the form can be lost when it's translated over to the drawing. For example, I made sure that the area between the head and the neck was a little bit darker so there is more definition. Be careful when doing this, it can change the shape of the subject and become a bit cartoony when done too dramatically. Use this technique sparingly. You should shade based on the reference first, and then if it needs that little helping hand, then you can add more. You don't need to do much, just a little bit of a tonal difference can be enough. Slowly work up your shadows when doing this to prevent overworking and to prevent making that area too dark. During this process, you can see me using my blending stump quite a bit. I am using that to help blend out some harsher areas of texture from the pencil and to create some smoother transitions between the tones. Initially, when I first started portraiture, I did not like using blending stumps, and I used the pencil and the pressure to create those transitions, which I highly recommend practicing as it is good to be able to do that. However, as I've done more portraiture, I find the blending stump as a useful tool to help get through the blending process a bit faster, and it does give a bit of a different look at the end. I'll tend to use it on subjects where I don't want that pencil texture included in the final work. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to see more, and you can also click the link on screen to watch another one of my videos where I go over my drawing process.